Last week, we concluded our series on heroes, heroines, and heretics. If you missed any of them, I encourage you to watch them. You can access them on our YouTube channel. But the series got me thinking about everyday kinds of courage. The courage it takes for us to simply be a part of life in a full and engaged way. Now, if you will indulge me just a moment, although I recognize you don't have much of a choice because I have the microphone, I would like to tell you this morning a little bit about a dream that I had this summer that had a pretty big impact on me and motivated me to preach on this topic this morning. So in this dream, a man who I knew was God and who vaguely resembled Reverend Marlon Lavenhar, oddly. So you know it had to be a dream because I'm not going to be dreaming about a straight white man God anyway. I mean, there's that, right? Sorry. I remember thinking at the moment, that's not Marlon, that's God. Anyway, so this man came to tell me in my dream that I had won $1 million. Now, I was skeptical. I can't even turn that off when I'm sleeping. What was this? I thought some kind of publisher's clearinghouse prize, I remember thinking. So I was about to walk away from him. And then I thought, well, maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe that's not God. Maybe it's a salesman. And he says, no, you entered a photo contest with your dogs, remember? And he held up a picture of my two deceased puppies together when they were young. It was one of my favorite pictures that I've taken of them. And so I recognized it. And for some reason, that made everything seem legitimate. God and the prize. So I took the envelope from him, and he disappeared. Now, when I opened the envelope, I found that it was indeed a check for $1 million made out to me. Well, okay then. But as I examined it more closely, the letters began to move, and I noticed that my name was beginning to be spelled incorrectly. And as often happens in the dreams where those words are written on a page, this continued to happen. So the next time that I looked down on the paper, the letters kept moving around, and eventually my name became nearly unrecognizable. I couldn't possibly cash this check, I remember thinking. I couldn't cash this check in the state that it was in. It wasn't even clear that this check was mine. So after some time talking this out in my dream with another All Souls staff member, because, see, evidently I take all y'all home with me, and I even get my consultation in my sleep from our staff. But we came to the conclusion that this was really no big deal. All I needed to do was to take the check back to God and ask him simply to reissue it. No big deal. I remember feeling relieved by my solution and was looking for the check. I must have set it down somewhere so that I could do just that, take it right on back to God and ask him to reissue it. And then I woke up. Now, I journaled nonstop for about 30 minutes about how beautiful this dream felt to me. In Gestalt dream analysis, which is part of the training that I got for some of the consulting work that I do, there's two things that are critical about dreams. One is the feeling that the dream evokes, regardless of the content. And two, that we represent each and every character in the dream. It's not literal. They're all parts of us. So we are, in fact, every character in the dream. I love this idea, that God part of me was wanting to talk to me, that it's my unconscious, creatively playing while I'm sleeping. But the question was, how is the me interacting with the other parts of me? And what am I saying to myself from those other roles, in this case, as God and as a staff member? Now, before you decide that I have completely and totally lost it, let me tell you the meaning that I made of it. The dream was not about the money. It was about the name on the check. And the story felt a bit like a parable. You see, I believe, much like Marlon does when he speaks about redemption, that we've all been issued a check with our lives, kind of like a coupon, and it's worth nothing unless we redeem it. We have to spend our gifts and our resources to save the world in order for them to be valuable. Marlon likes to tell the story that before we were born, the elders who've come before us pack into the babies that they're sending down into the world what the world needs. But they're like seeds that have been planted. It's the community's job to help us discover those gifts and then to use them so that we can offer them to the world. This dream was telling me that if we ever discover that we're holding the wrong check, that we have maybe held back or followed someone else's dreams for us, that if the name to whom that check was issued is not our own, all we have to do is go back to God and ask God to reissue that check with our real name on it, which requires surrender and humility and vulnerability and courage. Now, can you imagine that maybe the reason why you haven't quite been satisfied, haven't been able to redeem your check, is that you may be in fact holding someone else's? Well, you don't have to hold on to it anymore. There's a possibility of changing directions, of behaving differently, of actually using your heartbreak and all your skills that you've honed, all of your strengths and your vulnerabilities given to you like a spiritual do-over. An opportunity to reinvent relationships and jobs, and to use all of your experience in order to serve the world better. Now, I understand that not all situations can be restored and that not all circumstances can be readdressed. But there's a parallel to this actually in the work of the 12 steps, where each member who's working through the 12 steps has to go through an amends process. And it's not actually about the apology. It's more about making the choice from that point on to continue to live your life differently from then on out. When we examine the life that we're living, if we're not maximizing the use of our gifts in the world, we can, in fact, change directions. But it takes courage and a particular mindset. So let's look at the mindset first. Now, I happen to be listening to a book on audio called Mindset by Carol Dweck. You may have seen her article based on this research in the New York Magazine on how not to praise your child, about praising them on their effort instead of their smartness. The book is a great read and has already actually affected how Jill and I praise Beckett. As she writes, the mindsets are beliefs. Beliefs about yourself and your most basic fundamental qualities, your intelligence, your talents, your personality, your character. Dweck's research points to two predominant mindsets, a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. People with a fixed mindset believe that their traits are just givens. They have a certain amount of brains and talent, and nothing can really change that. If they have a lot, they're all set. But if they don't, they're doomed. People in this mindset worry about their traits and how adequate they are. They have something to prove to themselves and to others. A fixed mindset has a tendency to avoid challenges, give up easily on difficult tasks, see effort as fruitless, ignore useful negative feedback, and feel threatened by the success of others. But people with a growth mindset see their qualities as things that can be developed through dedication and effort. Sure, they're happy if they're brainy or talented, but that just is about the starting point. They understand that no one has ever accomplished great things, not Mozart or Darwin or Michael Jordan, without years of passionate practice and learning. A growth mindset leads to a desire to embrace challenges, to persist in the face of setbacks, to see effort as the path to mastery, to learn from criticism and celebrate and find inspiration in the success of others. According to Dweck, Scientists are learning that people have more capacity for lifelong learning and brain development than they ever thought possible. How many of you have Lumosity on your phone or on computer? You know what I'm talking about? If you haven't looked it up, you might want to check it out. It's a really interesting brain game that has been developed in order to enhance your brain's capacity. It's like a mental workout for your brain in 5 different areas. Flexibility, speed, I've forgotten the other ones, but there's 5. That means I need to work on memory. Oh, that was one of them. Memory was one of them. And actually, there's this really interesting, I'm 42. Here's the cool thing. You can compare yourself against the statistics across your age bracket so that you can actually see how you fare between 40 and 44-year-olds and not between 40 and 20-year-olds, which is super helpful. But the other thing they can do, which, I always used to say, I'm terrible at remembering names. I'm so much better at context, right? And now they actually have a game where you get to memorize faces and names, and it makes you practice that skill and actually learn to get better at it. It's not something you just have to resign yourself to. So anyway, Dweck's research, conducted over the last 20 years, has shown that the view you adopt for yourself, either fixed or a growth mindset, profoundly affects the way that you lead your life. It can determine whether you become the person you want to be, whether you live up to your own potential, whether you commit to and accomplish the things that you value. So Dweck actually asks in her book, why hide deficiencies instead of overcoming them? Why look for friends or partners who will just shore up your self-esteem instead of ones who will also challenge you to grow? And why seek out the tried and true instead of experiences that will stretch you? The passion for stretching yourself, even or especially when it's not going well, is the hallmark of the growth mindset and allows people to thrive during some of the most challenging times in their lives. And it takes courage. Everything in our culture mirrors back to us about the quick fix, not applying consistent effort. Our culture loves right and wrong, as Marlon prayed about today, good and evil, winners and losers. Our culture sends a message that says vulnerability is weakness and holds up a measuring stick for us to compare ourselves to some kind of normal, whatever that is, at every turn. But what if the check you're holding is the one that the culture gave to you, not the one that uses all of who you are? Your strengths and your weaknesses. What if you've made too many compromises along the way, so many that all the letters have been jumbled up and you barely recognize yourself? Is that just how it is? Or could you actually begin again from where you are right now in this moment and measure only from your own progress, doing better tomorrow than you did today? Dweck has actually done a lot of research on how to move people to this growth mindset, and it involves 4 concrete steps that you will probably forget, but you can Google. Her name is Dweck, D-W-E-C-K. Learn to hear your fixed mindset voice is the first step. Learn to be able to identify it when it shows up in your head. Now, I've named mine. I'm not going to tell you her name. But you can name yours too. We likely all have one. The question is whether or not we confuse it with our own voice as the definitive voice, the only voice. As you approach a challenge, that voice might say to you, are you sure you can do that? Maybe you don't have the talent. What if you fail? People will laugh at you. If you don't try, you can protect yourself and keep your dignity. As you hit a setback, the voice might say, this would have been a snap if you really had talent. It's not too late to back out or make excuses and regain your dignity. As you face criticism, you might hear yourself say, oh, it's not my fault. It was someone or something or someone else's fault. You might feel yourself getting angry at the person who's giving you feedback. The other person might be giving you specific and constructive feedback, and you might be hearing them say, I'm really disappointed in you. I thought you were capable, but now I see you're not. So the first step is to listen to that fixed mindset voice. And then step 2 is to recognize that you have a choice. How you interpret challenges, setbacks, and criticisms is a choice. You can interpret them in a fixed mindset as signs that your fixed talents or abilities are lacking, or you can interpret them in a growth mindset as signs that you might need to ramp up your strategies and effort, or stretch yourself in a new way, or expand your abilities. So as you face challenges, setbacks, and criticism, listen to that fixed mindset voice, recognize that you have a choice, and then learn to talk back to it with a growth mindset voice. So as you approach a challenge, the fixed mindset might say, "Are you sure you can do that? Maybe you don't have the talent." And the growth mindset says, "I'm not sure I can do it now, but I think I can learn to with time and effort." The fixed mindset says, "What if you fail? You'll be a failure." The growth mindset says, "Most successful people have had failures along the way." The fixed mindset says, "If you don't try, you can protect yourself and keep your dignity." And the growth mindset replies, "If I don't try, I automatically fail. Where's the dignity in that?" And when you hit a setback, the fixed mindset would say, "This would have been easy if you really had talent, or if it were meant to be. Difficulty means it was the wrong choice." And the growth mindset responds, "That is so wrong. Basketball wasn't easy for Michael Jordan, and science wasn't easy for Thomas Edison. They had a passion and put in tons of effort." And then as you face criticism, the fixed mindset might say, "It's not my fault. It was something or someone else's fault." The growth mindset says, "If I don't take responsibility for my part, I can't fix it. Let me listen, however painful it is, and learn what I can." And then lastly, step 4, you take that growth mindset into action. Because over time, which voice you heed becomes an easier and easier choice. So practice hearing both voices and practice acting on the growth mindset. We can practice in our relationships. According to Dweck, in relationships, 2 more things enter the picture: your partner and the relationship itself. So that means in a growth mindset, not only can I grow and change, but my partner can grow and change, and our relationship can grow and change. That's a lot. But I credit being able to leave that lid off the box, right? Being able to make space for our relationship and for my partner to grow for the 18 years that I've been gifted with my spouse. Now, in the fixed mindset, however, the ideal relationship is about instant, perfect, and perpetual compatibility. Like it was meant to be, like riding off into the sunset, like they lived happily ever after with no room for difficulty. But this is a cultural myth that does not promote the skill development needed for lasting relationships of growing and changing people. In the fixed mindset, problems are turned into blame and deep-seated character flaws. Whereas in the growth mindset, just as there are no great achievements without setbacks, there are no great relationships without problems along the way. So imagine the very thing in your life you think will never change, or the very person who you think will never change. You know the one. That one that you think you have all figured out. And now remind yourself to take off the role of God and to step back into your own shoes. Because if we want to be perceived as growing, complex beings, not taken for a single action or error, then we have to do the same for other people. Set them free from the confines of our beliefs about them. Figure out what we've learned so far and how we might apply it to how we could be different in relationship in the future, since we don't have control over anyone else's behavior anyway. So in order to go back and have your check reissued, you need a growth mindset and courage. Can we learn to be courageous? Not foolhardy or reckless, not unfeeling or deadened, but truly courageous. You know, courage comes from the word cur, the Latin root cur, which means heart. Courage is the strength to feel the fear, feel the pain, feel the doubt and the grief, and hope anyway, and pray anyway, and love anyway, and risk anyway. I think it can be learned, but it takes practice. It takes spiritual practice of humility and of forgiveness. You know, the crucifixion story leaves us with one of the most powerful tools of courage that I can ever imagine. In the midst of betrayal, in the darkness, in the middle of the day, confronted with doubt and meaninglessness, Jesus has the courage to cry out what was on his heart. My God, why have you forsaken me? Jesus addresses the very God that he has issue with, an argument for a connection even in what appears to be a separation. There is vulnerability that coexists with any true act of courage, and it requires us to make room for our own weaknesses and for doubt. And Jesus had to give up everything in order to be able to serve in the way that he was called to serve out his highest purpose. Everything. Now, it was this dream that drew me back in my spiritual practice to the beloved pages of Paul Tillich. Paul Tillich was an existentialist philosopher and one of the most influential theologians of this century. Tillich wrote that we must face our doubt and our meaninglessness in order to arrive at true courage. For Tillich, life's fullest meaning comes from having engaged with the possibility of its meaninglessness and then still having the courage to live. The courage to be, writes Tillich, is the courage to accept oneself as accepted in spite of being unacceptable. Now, I'm going to say that again because it's hard to digest. The courage to be, writes Tillich, is the courage to accept oneself as accepted in spite of being unacceptable. To accept in spite of judgment. That takes faith. To know one's fallibility, to know one's mistakes, to be clearly aware of them, and still be able to have the courage to hope, to know, to work hard, to change. According to Tillich, there are no valid arguments for the existence of God, but there are acts of courage in which we affirm the power of being, whether we know it or not, whether we believe in God or not. There is proof of God in how God has changed lives. How it has called us to a higher purpose, how God has called us to grow and learn and change and shift and serve. When we persistently choose love over hate, or forgiveness over blame, or connection over separation, when we choose life and life-affirming behavior over death and destruction, we are affirming the courage to be. So with a growth mindset and the courage to be, to make a contribution to this world as a growing, developing, and emerging being, what else we need, according to Tillich, is a community who can hold our evolution. Tillich says that the church can be that community, that it represents God and the power of being when and especially when it is diverse and embraces doubt. And so Tillich believes that we are best served when we have the courage to be a part of a diverse and evolving community and have the courage to risk showing up with our gifts and our resources to serve something more than ourselves. Our eyes open to freedom's unfolding. I want to tell you one last story, and it was not a dream. 3 days after I had dreamt about that $1 million check, I was at the airport on my way home from the coast of Maine to return to Tulsa, and I checked my bags at the airline counter, and I proceeded to the security line. Now, I was in my clerical collar, since I'm wearing it all year long, every day but Sunday, as a social experiment of sorts. Only 6 months left. At security, the TSA agent first smiled warmly at me and then, taking my ticket, said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, you can't come through." The name issued on your ticket does not match your driver's license. I was immediately thrown back into my dream as an overlay of this experience. Time seemed to slow down for me, and the TSA agent was not God, but she was a gatekeeper for me getting home. And every word seemed to be underscored. Did I mention that my God has a really, really big sense of humor and likes to make sure that I don't miss things? So I looked at the ticket. How could that be? The ticket read Tamararev Lebak. Oh, I see what happened, I told her. The computer added my salutation to the end of my first name, R-E-V. It must be a computer glitch from when I bought my ticket online. If I had put Mrs., it would have read Tamara-Amrs. And it seems to have added the abbreviation of my home state to my last name, OK. I looked at my watch and expected her to just say, oh, I get it, come on through. She did not. And she was no longer smiling. I had about 15 minutes to board the plane, and at this point I was very nervous about missing it. She said, if you would like to get on the plane, you're going to have to go get a ticket with only your name on it and spelled correctly. No title and no state abbreviation. You'll have to go back to the counter and have the ticket reissued. I laughed out loud. I'm afraid she probably wanted to go put me away right then, but I laughed at the irony of the situation. In order to go where I wanted to go, I needed to do so with just my name, with all of who I was, with no misunderstandings, without the confusion of added titles or geographical limitations. It felt like a message to me too. And whether or not this was happenstance or synchronicity or a message from my psyche that had been weighed down by wearing a clerical collar for too long, or a gift from God, the message was clear. What we need to redeem what has been given to us, what we need in order to go where we want to go, is the courage to be. To go beyond culturally affixed titles and roles, beyond the limitations of geography. If the check or the ticket we are currently holding has been issued to anyone other than ourselves, we need to go back in humility and ask for a new one. One that allows us to grow and change and learn and contribute. I am so blessed to be a part of this community that has grown and stretched with me for the past 8 years, and that once again is pushing me to be more and more of who I am in the church and in the world. But I know that who I am is only possible because of who this church is. I am so grateful to continue to be a part in this new way. I'm excited about the changes in the church structure that Marlon is leading in his pursuit to evolve and to grow while honoring the tradition that was gifted to us. And I hope that in this new way, I will continue to serve you and to make you proud. I love you. Amen.